This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
From Philadelphia to Erie, from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow, the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome.
Hello, Charlie.
Well, there is no shortage of interesting developments on Capitol Hill in Harrisburg.
That's for sure.
It seems like almost like the good old days of Milton Shapp, where we had so many people under investigation at the same time. Indictments were flying around Capitol Hill, and now it seems like some of this atmosphere is coming back.
Yeah, I think we need to create a flow chart of all this, Charlie, to keep track of everything.
That's a wonderful idea. I love that.
It's getting crazy.
Well, in lieu of a flow chart, how about if we turn to the state's
Our
crack
expert.
investigative reporter, and that is Brad Bumsted from the
Thank you,
Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Brad, welcome back to the program.
Appreciate it.
I hardly know where to start. We have two of our three row offices that have been under siege here in the most recent months, and if there's anyone who knows what's going on, it's you. I guess let's start with the Attorney General. What is the current state of that particular investigation? And first of all, would you tell our viewers what Kathleen Kane, our Attorney General, has some challenges? Could you please lay them out for our viewers, Brad?
Yeah, the trouble for Kathleen Kane started about a year ago, depending on when this is aired, but in the middle of March 2014, when the Philadelphia Inquirer broke a blockbuster story that she had declined to prosecute a case where there was videotape of an undercover informant who had gotten pictures and sound of five Philadelphia officials taking cash in return for alleged promises on legislation. He was posing as a lobbyist. He had been a lobbyist, but that was his role in the undercover. And she declined to prosecute this. She said the legal reasons were insufficient and that there was targeting of black officials in this, racial targeting. Well, she got into a spat with Seth Williams, the Philadelphia District Attorney, who objected to some of the characterizations of racism. He's the first black district attorney in the state of Pennsylvania. And he said, look, I would do this. And she said, you want the case, take it, more or less. In effect, she sent it to him, and he has proceeded to prosecute five officials. One has pleaded guilty so far, an ex-traffic court judge. Four others have been charged.
And it's somewhat of a partisan issue because all of the people that accepted those bribes were all Democrats, I believe.
And, well, I don't know, partisan. She's Seth Williams, who prosecuted them, is a Democrat.
Yes, I understand. But yeah, there were some people that believed that she was shielding officials from her party.
Oh, yes. There's some suspicion of that, but who knows why she made the decision that she did, but that's what she decided, that she could not prosecute this case. She also said that the informant had major problems, credibility problems, if it went before a jury, but other prosecutors have told me, look, we take convicted murderers and people who were dealt millions of dollars of drugs and take them in as witnesses against other co-defendants. It happens every day across America. You know that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so she declined to prosecute, and it moved forward without her. That really is, she can almost, it looks bad, or it's a problem, but she's not being criminally charged for anything. She made a decision, professional decision.
That's right.
And but she's got some other legal woes.
She does.
There are no legal woes for her there. There's a perception issue and a problem.
Right.
Question of judgment.
And most legal experts say there's wide prosecutorial discretion. Mm-hmm. You are allowed to, decide whether to prosecute or not for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and we should note that this is not uncommon.
No,
that it could be taken up by somebody else at a later time, or for whatever reason. So.
Well, this was a little uncommon in that they were on videotape.
Well, that part, that's a little tough.
But you're right, that it was not a legal problem for her per se. Mm-hmm. But what was that there was a an allegation filed by former prosecutors in the Attorney General's office that there had been a leak of grand jury material to the Philadelphia Daily News. Now, I've recently published the letter that was sent to a grand jury judge about that, and it doesn't name Kathleen Kane. It doesn't name anyone like that. It just says that it doesn't say where it came from. It's just that there was this call made to Chris Brennan, a fine investigative reporter for the Daily News, who in turn a call that came from Chris Brennan to them saying, look, I have this material, and they're saying, that's grand jury material, Judge, are you going to look into this? The judge proceeds. This judge, by the way, his name is William Carpenter, and he's based in Montgomery County. He's a county judge, but he oversees a statewide investigative grand jury. And Judge Carpenter appointed a special prosecutor to look into it, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Carluccio, who's primarily a defense attorney in Norristown, a private practicing attorney. And they look into it, and lo and behold, this is going on for some time. It's all behind closed doors. We don't really know what's going on. In November, Kane testifies before the grand jury, told reporters beforehand that she would tell the truth, that she has told the truth all along in this, and that she's not guilty of anything. However, it came out later in a filing by Carpenter released by the Supreme Court that the grand jury had recommended criminal charges against her. The Supreme Court, in effect, froze that and said, you can't proceed with this while Kane's lawyers challenge it. So Kane's lawyers took it to the Supreme Court on a bunch of different legal reasons. Some people say they're sound legal reasons to try to quash, if you will, the appointment of the special prosecutor, which would nullify the grand jury
everything
report.
That they came up with.
Supreme Court recently held arguments on that in Philadelphia. Where it's at right now is everybody's waiting, including Kathleen Kane, for this ruling by the Supreme Court, which, as you know, could have a variety of options
right.
of clearing her or allowing the case to proceed, or something in between.
Well, you've written some pretty interesting articles recently about how that information got to a grand jury level, the letter that was written. You've also written some interesting stories about her appearance before the Appropriations Committee. All seem to be intertwined and connected. And I don't know if you want to give us your firsthand perceptions of, is that letter a smoking gun, and why did the appropriations hearings go the way that they did?
I don't know whether the letter's a smoking gun at all. It was written by Frank Fina, who works for Seth Williams in the Philly DA's office and was the former chief deputy in the Attorney General's office under Tom Corbett. He and a colleague in Philadelphia sent this letter to the grand jury judge, Carpenter. Now, like I said, they didn't name Kane, but if this should ever proceed into criminal charges or go to trial, there's no doubt that her attorneys would bring up the fact that Fina sent this because she's had a public feud with him as well as with Seth Williams, and blamed him. Fina claims that he was had a target on his back, more or less, from the time of the Sandusky investigation. Jerry Sandusky, the former Penn State coach, because he was one of the lead investigators and the co-prosecutor on that case.
Yeah.
It gets complicated.
What a tangled web.
Yeah,
it is, definitely.
Well, she even seems to have problems retaining staff, Brad, and there have been many staff shuffles there, more than one would ordinarily expect in this amount of time. Any reason for that? You're just trying to find her way with the right group of people?
I think that's what she would say. There has been a high turnover. It seems to be exceptionally high. I agree with you, primarily in the PR people, but other areas as well. Top staffers, lawyers, chief of staff. But for instance, Adrian King, who was her former chief of staff, left after about a year and a half. But he had said in the beginning he was only going to stay for a year, so he stayed through the Sandusky report. But interestingly enough, he winds up being pitted against her now in a recent Philadelphia Inquirer story about the perjury. That's even more complicated. But back to your question about the Appropriations Committee, they were linked together only because it was
tiny.
over a 2-day period where she appears before the Appropriations Committee shortly after the Supreme Court had held arguments on this legal case, and at the Appropriations Committee, Democrat and Republican officials were showering her with love, just praise, for the job she's done on fighting drugs and all that. And to her credit, they seem to think that she's done a really good job there. And that is, but there was also some parochialism involved in that each legislator was concerned about the heroin problem in their district and getting her newly established mobile crime unit to come into their districts.
All politics is local.
It is.
Yeah. Well,
in the last minute and a half that we have, Brad, I'm sorry, we spent too much time on just one office. Can you give us a quick synopsis of what's gone on in regard to the state treasurer, Rob McCord? He had troubles coming out of the last election cycle as well.
Well, yes, he goes back to federal court for pre-sentence investigation in June. That's the newest thing to come up. But what it was is this just exploded more or less out of the blue, where McCord sent a letter out to the media saying that he was going to resign, and no one had expected it. There was no explanation of it. Turns out he's charged by federal authorities for extortion, 2 counts of attempted extortion against people who had state contracts. He immediately fessed up in a videotape. When he went to court and was charged, he stated that he had done this, and now it's just a matter of time till he's sentenced and see what he gets.
In the last 3 seconds, or something like that. Tough budget season for the new governor, or is everything going to go okay?
Well, the talk on Capitol Hill is this could be like 2003 with Rendell's first budget that's not resolved till December.
Oh. That's not a good rumor.
No.
Yeah. We'll have to see that.
They are very far apart and approaching it from totally different philosophical base.
Okay.
Brad,
great.
we're going to keep the chair warm for you.
I'm not done with my questions.
We're not done with you, but our viewers will ask to read your column to stay abreast of what's happening in Harrisburg, and we'll have you back as soon as possible. We'll be right back with segment 2 of Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by Blackford Ventures, LLC, a private equity firm seeking to make significant investments in real estate, proven business enterprises, and their leaders. Find out more at www.blackfordventures.com. And by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Maura and I are joined by Ken Mash, who is the president of APSCUF. APSCUF is the faculty union for the 14 state-owned universities of PASSHE. It stands for the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculty. Welcome aboard, Ken.
Thanks, Charlie. It's great to be here, Maura.
Well, it's nice to have you back. There's a lot happening in higher education around the Commonwealth and around the country. Maura and I were wondering if you could start out by giving us sort of a snapshot. We have a new governor, a new administration, and a new budget proposal on Capitol Hill in Harrisburg. What does this budget have in store for higher education, Ken?
Well, it's been a long 4 years. In 2011, the state system of higher ed, the 14 state-owned universities, had their budget cut by $90 million. And what happened after that 18% cut, what we have seen since that time is tuition has gone up for students. something like 17%. They're paying $1,000 more in tuition. Fees have gone up 18%. At the same time, we have lost 270 faculty members, 800 permanent employees have been let go from the university, either let go or not, positions haven't been filled. So we've started to cut into programs and the quality of education that we've offered. So there was that cut in 2011, but since that time, it was cut in 2011 and there was no money added over those 4 years. So it's been a very difficult time for us. We are fortunate, we think, now to have a governor who really cares about public higher education. And what he's proposed in his budget is to have a 2-year restoration plan. So $45 million in the upcoming year and $45 million in the next year. Now, that doesn't solve every problem. The system itself for next year projects that it's going to have a $50 million, with no increases at all, it would have a $50 million hole to fill. And that $50 million doesn't include any salary increases. In fact, they project a decrease in salary and wages included in that $50
All of those
million.
things have not remained stagnant over the last 4 years. They've continued to grow, too. Right. So it sounds wonderful, but it sounds like it's just filling in, it's throwing dirt into the hole at this point.
Right. Well, so certainly in this upcoming year with the $45 million, that doesn't solve all of our problems. I think we're viewing it as a 2-year plan. So it's going to be very difficult this year. And the hope is after year 2, now we can get back on track. Everybody has a lot of suggestions about things that we should be doing at our universities, ways we could be better serving the Commonwealth. There are concerns about some of the universities and their positions. But it's very difficult to have serious conversations about what are you going to do different or new when you're scrounging for your own survival. And that's really been the case for the last few years. So, once we get through this year, next year, if we do get to that point of full restoration, hopefully then we can start to tackle some of the other issues, which are, students having increasing debt. The average graduate from one of our schools graduates with $30,000 in debt. That's a lot of money. And that's not just bad for those individual students, that's bad for Pennsylvania's economy, because those students are not buying homes, they're not buying cars. Their money in large part in the beginning, as far as wages goes, is going to pay off those student loans. So, there is a lot of talk around the country of a student debt crisis. That's certainly true in Pennsylvania too. But we could start then focusing, okay, now we're back where we were, then we haven't accounted for any kind of inflation or whatever. The students are already paying more. Let's try and make sure the students don't have to pay any more as far as tuition increases go for some time. And the governor's asked the system to not increase tuition. And as I said, that they had projected that hole already at $50 million, which means that even with this first year of restoration, if there's no tuition increase, it's going to be very difficult.
Well, I know our viewers are thinking, okay, the governor's proposed this, but now they want to know what's the plan. It has to get through the General Assembly. Right. So, I'm sure you're really busy right now talking to members of the General Assembly and making some plans. How's that going? Yeah,
we've been having a lot of conversations with a lot of different members about the state of the system. I think our chancellor is one now who also has been visiting with legislators and letting them know, giving them accurate information about the status of the system, but also accurate information about how many of their students are actually living, students in their districts that are going to one of our schools. And it turns out there's a lot. Like even the smallest district with students still has about 80 students or 50 students who are going there. So there's districts, hundreds of students are going to one of our schools. So it really does impact the entire Commonwealth.
So the chancellor himself is being proactive and being on the Hill and sharing information about individual districts.
Yeah, and the thing is, of course, the chancellor is he's part of the government per se, so he doesn't lobby per se, but he does go up there and provide information and lets them know about the status of what's going on. And he has been doing that, and we've been doing that a lot too. We're lucky in our association to have good people working with us to to reach out. And I've really been encouraged, and this is a bipartisan thing. It's not just Democrats. It's not, it's not just liberal members who think, oh, this is something we need to do. As we go around, we find more and more people who look at the numbers, who look at what's happened, and they have to say, yes, it's true. Our universities are the state's universities. A lot of people associate Pennsylvania with Penn State, but Penn State's a state-related university. We are state-owned. Our sources of income really are the allocation from the state and tuition. When the system was created, there was an understanding that we are Pennsylvania's universities, and they have a responsibility to our universities and to the students and to the people of the Commonwealth to make sure that there is a route there for an affordable education. We are, like I said, in conversations with some important Republican leaders, but also Republicans who surround our universities, but also ones who are not. They understand that the state has an obligation to our universities, and it hasn't been living up to that obligation.
When you talk about the two sources of income being state income and tuition, the governor, when he put forth this budget proposal, as you said, has called for PASSCUF to freeze tuition for 2 years in return for this increase, or not increase, but a restoration of funding. Yeah. There's some other programs, some other ideas out there, Ken, that perhaps you can share with our viewers on approaching tuitions and dealing with tuition costs, and some of the parts of PASSCUF are thinking of dealing with it in different ways. Could you talk about some of the tuition arrangements that are being thought of out there?
Sure. At Millersville last year enacted a pilot program where they were dealing with a different way of approaching tuition. So ordinarily what happens if you're a college student, what most people are used to, if you go full-time, you're paying one rate. So in other words, if you're taking 12 credits, you pay one rate. If you're taking 15 credits, you pay one rate. If you're taking anywhere from 15 to 18, you're going to pay that one rate. Millersville was the first to move to this pay-by-the-credit plan. So what's happening is if you take 13 credits, now you're paying more than if you were taking 12. Oh. 14. So if you if you're taking a full load of 15 credits, and remember, the standard is it's 120 credits to graduate. That breaks down to 15 credits a semester over 4 years. So if you follow that plan, immediately you're paying 25% more in tuition than you were paying before. Okay. We, as an association, believe in public higher education. If you already have a situation where the student, and not including Millersville overall, where the students are already paying for 75% of the cost of their education, and now you throw on there a 25% tuition increase, really you're starting to eliminate the notion itself of public higher education. We've seen now that Millersville is doing that. We've seen other universities like Indiana University who wants to do it. Shippensburg University wants to do it. From what I understand, Kutztown is also looking at doing it.
You have to back up. Why would anybody do that? Why would anybody pay by the credit?
You mean why would students
why would students
do that? Because they want to go to that particular university.
Okay.
So those universities, Bloomsburg University is planning on doing it. Okay. In some instances, there's like a phase-in, and Millersville has a phase-in, so it's a little bit less expensive.
So are they going to be moving exclusively to these kind of plans?
Yeah, it's a pilot. They're looking at how it's going to impact their students, their enrollment, and the rest.
Fascinating.
Again, we're not for that, but at the same time, I try not to beat up on the administrators who come up with this. Remember that they started doing this before there was any talk of putting more money in the budget.
Back into the system.
So, they're looking at a situation where we were seriously cutting into the quality of the education that we're providing our students. We're cutting out programs, not hiring faculty. Charlie can tell you too, at Millersville, they have almost a crisis there of not replacing faculty members. So the question then becomes, are you going to exist as a true university? And if you are, then you've got to pay the bills somehow.
Yeah.
So we don't blame them for trying to find other ways to raise revenue and the rest, but it is, much more preferable to have the state actually meet its obligation to our universities and to, frankly, the people of the Commonwealth, particularly the working people of the Commonwealth, to provide an affordable route for higher education. Mm-hmm. That's the route that we prefer. This year, as I said, it's still going to be tough. We, with no tuition increase, with not filling the gap, with any other wages increases or whatever it's going to be a difficult year for the state system. But we're looking at this, as the governor has said, as a 2-year route for total restoration of that $90 million.
Well, you're looking at the future of higher ed, Ken, in Pennsylvania, but also across the country. I believe that APSCUF and you are going to be involved with a conference that's coming up in Philadelphia. It's going to be examining the future of higher education across the country. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Yes. Our organization has joined with faculty unions in New York State and in California and in a couple of other states to try and get together to discuss higher ed as a national issue. The issues that we're confronting in Pennsylvania are not novel to Pennsylvania. As budgets are tight all across the country, higher ed has suffered all across the country. So we've decided to come together to try and address these things, to see how can we work together to start some national conversation about it. It's our turn to sort of host this conversation, and we're going to do that Memorial Day weekend in Philly. So we're going to talk about things about, funding for public higher ed. Pennsylvania, it's sad but true that we are 49th out of 50 states in per capita spending on public higher education. So it's serious for us in that way. We are fortunate in our system that we have not relied as much on adjunct faculty members as is the case in other states. There's an organization out there called New Faculty Majority. That organization represents adjuncts, because if you look around the country, the trend now is the majority of the faculty on campuses is made up of adjunct faculty, not permanent faculty there, which they may not have PhDs, they may not have the training, they're not going to be there to do the same kind of advising and the rest. They're doing it simply because it's cheaper, and not only is it cheaper, but they pay very, very low wages for this, and that's become a national concern. Is there are people really being exploited, having to work at 3 and 4 universities in order to get together, to put up together enough money to make a living doing this. So that's one of the issues we'll be discussing. But again, we're glad that we're working in a system that doesn't do that.
Ken, will you please come back and tell us then a little bit about that conference in Philadelphia and what comes out of it?
It's been my pleasure. It's always a pleasure.
We'd love to have you back, and we hope you'll come back again next week to join Mara and me on Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.